What's a popular tourist destination that you found underwhelming? Story 1. Skywalk on the west rim of the Grand Canyon. Massively overpriced and scummy because they lock up your phones and then charge ridiculous additional pricing for pictures. Cool, not worth. Go to the south rim. It has a better view and it doesn't cost extra. Story 2. The room with the Mona Lisa in it. Couldn't get anywhere near it. And it's not that big of a painting to see from the back of the room when all the people in front of you had giant cameras. Maybe it's better in the age of cell phone cameras, but I doubt it. Story 3. Dubai. I fly back and forth from Australia to Europe a fair bit and always try to do a few days or a week stopover in between to break it up. Dubai was by far the most underwhelming. It's a giant shopping mall. Changi Airport has more local character than the city of Dubai. Story 4. That glass walkway over the Grand Canyon. You have to drive into a reservation like 90 minutes from anything. Weak or no cell coverage, long waits. Everything costs too much and is crap quality. A literal tourist trap. Never again. They don't let you take your own phone or electronics onto the glass overlook, so they can upsell you on their photo packages. Don't do it. Story 5. Naples, Italy. Picture an Italian town overrun with tourists and pizza. Now fill it with pounds and pounds of trash. That place has the worst littering problem I have ever seen in my life. It smells like a pizza trash dump. Do not go there. Go to anywhere in Italy that is normal, I promise. Story 6. The terracotta soldiers in Xi'an. Very crowded, very hot, people selling stuff everywhere you turn, and no effort is made into making the viewing any kind of experience. I usually don't mind places that people refer to as touristy, but this was too much for me. Lots of other great stuff in Xi'an, though. Story 7. Ruby Falls. I live in Chattanooga. It's the biggest waste of money here as far as the tourist stuff goes. If you ever come here, check out Rock City, the aquarium, and do some minor hiking, and you'll see the best of the city. There are also like 8 breweries and 2 whiskey distilleries. Ruby Falls would just take time away from seeing that stuff. Story 8. Santorini. We spent a couple of weeks in Greece and it was all amazing, except Santorini. Took a boat from Athens to Crete. Decided to spend one night on Santorini just to say we have been there. 99% tourists. Hotels stacked on hotels stacked on hotels. We had a decent view, and the locals we met were great. Talking with them, we heard how hard it is. Per some of the people we met, most of the housing is owned by people who don't live there, and it is used to rent to tourists. One person told us that the teachers for the local school live in tents next to the school because there is no housing available for people who live there. These are anecdotal for some locals, but from what I saw, I can believe them. Story 9. San Francisco is a magical city if you avoid every single touristy place they tell you to go. Substitutes. Alcatraz is just a concrete 1950s prison. Expect no more than that. But I personally think Angel Island and renting a bikes is a better thing to do in about the exact same time and cheaper. Japanese tea garden in the park are okay, but overpriced and usually crowded. Go to the Botanic Gardens literally across the street. Everything about Haight-Ashbury is BS. Avoid Fisherman's Wharf like the plague. Nobody ever goes to see the bison in the park. It's free. IDK, I find the fact we have a random herd of bison in the middle of our city park the last 130 years, and they're half the reason they aren't extinct in the US is cool. Story 10. Honestly, Paris. I've been twice, and I do love the city. It is gorgeous. But I 100% recommend only going for a couple days, then venturing out into small suburbs, towns, and villages. Paris just smells like piss, like literally reeks of piss. Like I cannot express how bad the piss smell is. Like, I mean, if you're into that kind of thing, Jesus, hit up Paris. But yeah, I just think it's overhyped. That's not to say it's not incredible. Paris is so worth going to. Just don't be fooled by the movies and travel blogs. I was just a little underwhelmed, was not as I expected. And I will say it again, the piss OML. It smells so bad. Story 11. Budapest, Hungary. So many people told me it was their favorite place in Europe. I know that Americans have a cheery sort of disposition that seems weird to non-American people, but the Hungarians seem like they genuinely hated their lives and also me. It's kind of pretty, but it's also dirty as fuck. Everyone openly just wants your money, and the baths are not hot enough. Story 12. Honestly, Juliet's balcony in Verona, Italy. Been there once, and it was packed and basically queuing down the entrance-exit walkway for ages. Then when we got into the courtyard, the whole thing just felt incredibly underwhelming. I do remember there was a statue of Juliet, where many people had rubbed her boobs, so they were shining a bright gold. And on the way out, there was walls of love notes stuck down, but someone hadn't had any paper, it would seem, so had written a love note on a large sanitary pad. Obviously, I had to take a photo. Story 13. Times Square. I was expecting this epic, vibrant hub, but it was just a crowded, overpriced mess of people and flashing ads. The lights and billboards are cool for about 5 minutes, but then it's just sensory overload. Save your time and check out some of NYC's real gems instead. Story 14, Dubrovnik. Felt like some strange and not nearly as colorful adult Disney. The same shops over and over with just barely okay food, including a Hard Rock cafe that really threw me for a loop. I felt trapped in the old city walls. I'm speaking directly to being in the city, not the things to do outside the city such as beaches, etc. And it was our last stop on a 3.5-week Europe vacation, so we had seen a lot of beautiful architecture, museums, old buildings, history, and all that jazz already. Cities visited prior included Paris, Munich, Salzburg, and the countrysides of Germany, Austria, and Slovenia, favorite, as well as Brac, loved, Orebek, liked a lot, and Korčula had more of that Disney feel. Story 15. Versailles. Always wanted to go there. It wasn't terrible, but it was definitely overcrowded and commercialized. The magic feeling of being in a real-life historical palace where real people such as Marie Antoinette walked the halls, slept, and lived just wasn't there because of so many people and the way things were basically just a display. You also see only a very small part of the palace. Story 16. Key West. Overbuilt, beaches suck. Water is generally gross unless you take a boat out to a sandbar full of drunk and obnoxious boomers, and more expensive than it's worth. It was probably really beautiful and interesting back in the day, but is now ruined by people. The Hemingway property was cool though. Good food, overall not really affordable for your average American. Story 17, Western Wall. Somehow the rabbis at the day school never got around to mentioning that the women's section is 1/3 the length, and that if you pray to loudly or otherwise party like the men do, or Chaz v'Shalom read Torah, there's a chance that you'll spark a riot and or get arrested. Story 18. Statue of Liberty. Long line to get on boat. Packed in once on boat. No good view once you're at the statue. Waiting like cattle for the next boat to arrive. Empty. And then get on, if there's room. Just take the Staten Island ferry, takes you right past it, and you get great views and pictures. Story 19, Florida. From Disney to the beaches, it's just horrible drivers, arguing families, inexplicably high prices, and asphalt. I'm not sure why people go back over and over, and I definitely don't understand why so many people want to move there. Makes my social battery run to zero just thinking about the throngs of aimlessly wandering slow walkers. Story 20. St. Martin. The island is neglected by the French and Dutch governments, and the place is very run down as a result. The tourist spots that weren't destroyed in Hurricane Irma are crowded and dirty. I wouldn't feel safe leaving these areas as crime is an issue and there is almost no transportation infrastructure. I chatted with one of the tour guides who was telling me about how corruption of local police is so rampant that France has had to send military personnel into the island to act as the police. Overall, it's a been there, done that place. Story 21, Café du Monde. Visited New Orleans a couple of times. That place is packed all day. The workers look like they have had enough even before their shift starts, understandably. The food is okay at best. Nothing out of this world TBH. The live ambiance given by whatever performer is there during the evening isn't bad either. Story 22, I'm archaeologist, and my vote is Troy. I knew what was coming, and it was exactly what I expected. Still underwhelmed. It's one thing for me as an archaeologist, but I can easily imagine a tourist not being very enthused about the place. The on-site museum helps for context for tourists, I suppose, but only so much. If I were planning a trip for a casual traveler and they had limited time, I would suggest they skip it unless they had a special desire to see it. Story 23, Bora Bora. Costs a fortune, but there's basically nothing to do and nowhere good to go and eat. The beaches are nice, but you could see the same in other more affordable places. I suppose the only way to enjoy it is to be very wealthy and stay at an all-inclusive resort. But then I personally can't see the point of going overseas if you're just going to stay in a resort the whole time. Story 24, St. Basil's Cathedral in Moscow. The outside is every bit as beautiful in person as you'd imagine, so I had my hopes up for seeing the inside. I had never even seen a picture from inside the cathedral before I went, so I was expecting the same kind of beauty as on the outside. Nope, it's so dull and generic. There was one cool mural on one wall, but that's it. It was also much smaller than I was expecting. Still glad I had the opportunity to see it, though. Story 25, Italy. In Venice, if you're above 5'10", forget about it. When I went there 2 years ago with the family, everyone wanted the traditional experience of getting in a boat, and that resulted in me having to either bend my neck down for 30 minutes and move out of my seat onto the floor because the tour guide kept wanting me to stop blocking the windows with the tourist places being filled with people, noisy as anything, and having trash everywhere with people picking up trash as we were getting off, telling us to please stick to the middle of the stairs. In Milan, we went shopping, and the workers there didn't stop eyeing us from when we got in to when we left, ignoring our questions and attempts to try and talk to them about products, with a female worker actually suggesting to my sister that other shops would be more affordable when she questioned how much a certain bag would cost. Probably just caught people on bad days, but it definitely soured the image of Italy to me and my family. Story 26. The world's tallest filing cabinet in Vermont, LOL. This is a shit post, though. First off, it's Vermont, weird place, New England's strangest state. And I mean, who really wants to see the world's tallest filing cabinet, LOL? My brother lived in Burlington for a while, and I decided to go see it while I was there. So random. In a super random location, and just a super tall filing cabinet. Story 27. Atlanta built this Ferris wheel about 15 years ago downtown by Centennial Park. It was super hyped, and we went for a B-day. It was so lame, you can't really see anything because of all the buildings. Went around about 5 minutes, and that was it. My last favorite attraction downtown. Story 28, Rodeo Drive. Seeing the Pretty Woman Hotel was cool. The $30 cocktail, not so much. It's a few blocks of stores no average person can afford, and it's way too crowded. I was shocked when I saw it and realized that's all it was. I really expected it to be IDK something, not just a mall of luxury stores. Story 29. My friend came to visit me in New York and wanted to see Times Square. I told her it was pretty underwhelming, but I took her anyways. We get off the subway, walk up to the street. She looks around and goes, "It's all advertisements?" I said, "Well, yeah." She rolled her eyes and said, "Let's get the fuck out of here, LOL." I took her to Rudy's instead. Story 30, Tombstone, Arizona. ARG. The boyfriend really wanted to go and see the OK Corral. ARG. Drive in the heat. Okay, so going to Arizona in July wasn't the best idea in the first place, but I had to go to court to settle my mother's estate, and that's when we were there. The town was essentially just a dirt road with some buildings that were kind of old that contained gift shops. Many gift shops full of many imported pieces of crap. Nothing original is there because there were fires. There were some tired-looking actors having really sappy shootouts in the street on schedule, but otherwise, just don't bother. There is a cemetery on the way into town with a gift shop, but I think that it's fake. But he wanted to go, so we went. Ugh, it was horrible. There are many cool things to see in Arizona. You can just skip Tombstone. Story 31, Paris. Visited France for years, on and off with family, but mostly to coastal regions. Finally got around to Paris last year, and it was a nightmare. Gangs followed my girlfriend everywhere. She's blonde, and they seemed amazed at this, making strange noises at her and pointing at their crotch. I got mugged. Worst part ever was we went to a fancy Michelin restaurant, and I slipped in human feces outside it. I actually saw on 3 separate occasions people defecating on the sides of the streets. Story 32, Dublin for me. It was dirty in many places, and generally just a bit sketchy. Not enough to feel actively unsafe, but enough to feel slightly uncomfortable. I'm still glad I visited, but I'd be in no great rush to return. And by most accounts, it's gotten worse in recent years. Story 33, the Hoover Dam. Honestly, the pictures do it justice. Unless you're coming from Vegas, it's a long-ass drive from anywhere. It's super congested even in the fall and spring. There's TSA security to get in, and then the tour of the innards is extra. I was sick of the place before I even got there because it was surrounded by construction roadwork in April 2018 when I first visited the area. Story 34, Glass Beach in Fort Bragg. It is nothing like the Pinterest pictures. There are lots of people, and they get upset because they realize that it's nothing like the pictures they have seen online and what little glass is in the sand everyone is trying to take a picture of. And they get upset that they feel like you are ruining the pictures that they are trying to take. There is trash and seaweeds everywhere. Multnomah Falls in Oregon. It's very pretty, but there is competition for the few parking spots that are there. Story 35, Niagara Falls. Don't get me wrong, it's a natural wonder for sure and a sight to behold, but it's definitely a one-day stop. The Canadian side is much better, but both sides suffer from being 2 tourist traps covered in concrete and tons of people. I would much rather that both sides are more nature-focused and can double as a hiking area. Make me work to see the falls in their natural habitat, not surrounded by civilization with all the bright lights and party atmosphere. I wish it was more like other natural parks in the West and allowed to breathe. Story 36, New Zealand. I'm from the UK, and my whole life I'd grown up hearing that NZ has it all and it's the best place on earth. I didn't get there until I was 40, by which point I was extensively traveled. And yes, NZ had a bit of everything. Beaches, mountains, fjords, lakes, forests, etc. But the mountains are better in Italy/Switzerland/Austria. The beaches are better in France/Spain/Western Isles. The fjords are better in Norway. The lakes are better in Hungary. The forests are better in Finland, Latvia, etc., etc. If you have never traveled, then NZ is a great one-stop shop to see a little bit of everything. But if you have, then it's a 36-hour/1,700 pounds flight that you could have spent doing something much better. Added to which I'm vegan and that was a complete non-starter. I lived on hummus and chips for 2 weeks. Story 37, Amalfi. I'm Italian. Just went for a second time 2 days ago to take my 2 kids. 1 hour, 2 max, and you've got the feel for what it is. First time I went, we took my uncle's boat, and it was fun stopping along the way and jumping in the water. This was 25 years ago. Second time I did the tourist thing, took the ferry. I hate tourists and being one. I hate what it's become. Wannabe influencers dressed like they're in a 70s movie. It's crowded. This year, Italy has had super hot, humid weather. And if you don't let the locals know you're Italian, you'll get destroyed with prices. You can literally get off the ferry and get the best view, and then jump back on and GTFO. Story 38, Disney's Hollywood Studios, Florida. It felt like such a missed opportunity to celebrate Disney's older cinematography. It doesn't seem to have much of an identity, which is a shame, as I've heard it was a great place to find memorabilia for the older films closer to when it first opened. Now it just sells the same merch in all the parks. However, Epcot really did surprise me. Such a zen place, I loved it. Story 39. I hope I'm not downvoted for my opinion, but Porto, I far enjoyed Lisbon, Barcelona, and Seville more. It felt more gritty, and we saw much of the main attractions fairly quickly. I wanted to experience the love of the city much more, given how often it is mentioned here. Story 40. Kyoto. For me, transportation was a headache, tourist spots itself banning, or not allowing tourists at all, which I get it is to protect the spots of cultural heritage, but the rudeness in the way they respond to queries is uncanny. Restaurants charging more for tourists. It's just a bad spot to be in general. I mean, if the economy of the place is governed or at least majorly contributed to by tourists, why such extreme levels of discrimination and rudeness is needed? Story 41, Graceland. We paid about $25 per person back in 2007, and you don't realize how small it is until you actually walk through it. And you don't even get to see half the house. The second floor is off limits. Elvis's private jet was kind of neat to see, though. I still tell people unless you really, really, really love Elvis, you're better off going to the Gibson Guitar Factory or the Rock and Soul Museum instead. Story 42, Cradle Mountain in Tasmania. It felt very artificial. My wife and I went to see lots of wildlife and were extremely disappointed by the lack of it, especially around Dove Lake. The bus is in and out, and the high price to get it does not make it worth it. You could go to any other national park, or not even, and still see amazing wildlife and impressive scenery. The wombats at dusk were definitely amazing, but other than that, we'll definitely be giving it a miss on future visits.